Har has had a long-term relationship with Annonas, so I would really like him to share his knowledge about all sorts of Annonas that he has come in contact with and studied over the years. So here's Har.
The species name is Annona reticulata. It is native to the Yucatan Peninsula and nearby areas in Central America. There is a wild form called Annona primigenia that's probably the ancestor of this. Those fruits are tiny and mostly seed, and one finds the trees growing along the fences of pastures in western Guatemala and probably other areas of Central America. Custard apple is a terminology used differently in different parts of the world. If you're from Australia, you use it differently from the way we do here in Florida. Here in Florida, we use custard apple only for this species, which is also known as bullock's heart, because the fruit resembles the heart of a cow. In Spanish, it's known as Annona, and that word is used by botanists for the genus that includes many species. In Cuba, they call it chirimoya, which confuses some of us because chirimoya is another species that grows down in the Andes. And that's where the name chirimoya first was used, because it's in the Quechua language, not Spanish. Now, custard apples flower in the spring about the same time as other Annonas, but the fruit set stays very tiny for months and then grows during the late fall and winter. And the fruits ripen sometime between February and May, depending on which variety and the weather that particular year. Notice that the custard apple leaves are long, dark green, and shiny. When someone talks to you about chirimoya, check about the leaves so that you're on the same page. If a Cuban talks to you about chirimoya, they're talking about this one. But the true chirimoya from the Andes has a wide, roundish leaf that's fuzzy. It's not this dark green, shiny, long, pointy look. Now, the fruit of the custard apple has a very thin skin and a lot of pulp. The good ones are very creamy, and there are quite a few black shiny seeds, kind of like watermelon seed, but cylindrical rather than flat, but black and shiny. The aroma is perfumey, and the flavor is sweet mixed with some tartness. And the good ones are just as creamy as pudding, and that's why we call them custard apples. Now, notice I said the good ones. There are bad custard apples that aren't custardy at all. They actually seem to have sand in them. And you may end up coughing after eating because the grit is tickling your throats. Kind of like a pear. These can be bred with other species, and I'll talk about that later. Custard apple can also be used as rootstock for other species. If you have a collection of related species, it's important that you bag the fruit of the custard apple when it's about the size of a dime or a quarter. Use preferably a cloth bag. You want to pollinate or have fruit set back towards the bases of the branches, not out towards the tips. And when you put the bag on, you can't tie it to the stem of the fruit or you'll break that off because it's small and weak yet. So you tie the bag back over the branch. And you use a big bag because the fruit's going to get big. Even though you're bagging a very tiny fruit right now, but you use the full-size bag. At stores that sell things for parties, you can buy ready-made bags that people give candies at parties and so on. It's a see-through material that actually lasts very well out in the weather. So you can reuse these bags several years. You don't have to worry about getting a perfect seal when you tie the bag onto the branch, because the bugs that come by to lay eggs in the fruit aren't going to try to get in. If they don't see that small round shape they're looking for, they just fly right on by. What those bugs do, and they're called Annona seed borers, they have a long tube at their back end that's called an ovipositor. That means it lays eggs. They'll drill down into the tender young fruit and lay one egg in one baby seed, and then pull the ovipositor out and stick it back in and lay another egg in another seed. If they do 6 or 8 seeds, that works best for them. If they do nearly all the seeds in a fruit, the plant will notice and will usually abort the fruit. So on Annonas you often see mummified black fruit. There's several different causes of that, but the main cause is that an Annona seed borer has laid too many eggs in there and the tree itself has aborted the fruit. When you have other species, you don't want these Annona seed borers to be multiplying in your yard. And the issue with custard apple is that because these fruit overwinter, the Annona seed borers are protected inside the fruit during the cold weather. And then when they come out, they'll get in your sugar apples and atamoyas and some other Annonas. So if you bag at least your custard apple, then you won't have the Annona seed borers multiplying on your own property. If you have neighbors around with trees, you'll probably want to bag all your species of Annonas if you're in southern Florida where this Annona seed borer can get quite bad. It is a tropical to subtropical fruit tree. It can take cold down to about 28 degrees if the plant isn't tiny and all young and tender. The fruits taste best when the tree retains its leaves through most of the winter until the fruit is ripe or almost ripe. If we get severely cold weather early in the winter or too dry conditions and the tree loses most of its leaves, then the fruit will not be sweet and flavorful. It is not adapted to growing in swamps, but it does very well in well-drained sandy soils, and it also does very well in limestony alkaline soils. The trees sometimes get infested with mealybugs. Sometimes the whole fruit will get covered with mealybugs and their sticky honeydew. When you pick the fruit, you can, while the fruit is still hard enough to handle, you can spray the mealybugs off with a garden hose, with a hose pistol, or in the sink, rub it off. When the fruit get fully ripe, they're so soft that they're hard to handle, like an oriental persimmon. They'll get mushy soft, and your fingers can go right into the fruit because the skin is so soft. At that stage, it would be hard to wash the mealybugs off. As with most of the other Annonas, the custard apple cannot be expected to be very productive if the soil is deficient in calcium or boron or zinc. The leaves may look fine, but if there's not quite enough of those three elements to form seeds, then the tree is unlikely to fruit. There are quite a few named varieties of custard apple, of Annona reticulata. I like the canul very much, and the benki, and some of the others. Most of these one can't readily find in nurseries though, so that's a problem. Some nurseries sell seedlings of San Pablo, and others sell seedlings of Sartaneja, also known as Sartanaya. Those are less colorful than the others I mentioned, but the flavor is very good and the production is very good. With custard apple seedlings, most of them wind up being pretty good if the seed were from good parents. Each seedling is a new individual, so if you plant seeds of the San Pablo, call it San Pablo seedling, or put a new name on it. Don't say it's a San Pablo, because there's some variation. There are quite a few other varieties available out there that I've seen beautiful pictures of but haven't tasted. The Fernandez is extremely red inside. I recently got a plant, but it hasn't fruited yet for me. It's still small. The custard apple trees do need to be of a pretty good size, around 8 or 10 feet tall, pretty good diameter trunk, or even bigger, before they're ready to hold fruit, because the fruit are normally quite large. They can be smaller, but preferably they're quite large.